York ever. But this is really, really good news. And compared to where we were, this is a big sigh of relief. We talked about calibrating the control of the reopening based on the metrics that we have seen. We said this from day one. We then did this graphic that people mocked me for. But people mocked me for a lot of things, and it doesn't bother me because I like it. The reopening of the economy is a valve. And you can open it faster, you can open it slower. We've seen it opened very fast. We've seen it opened all at once. We've seen states get into trouble. We've seen countries get into trouble, and then they had to close the valve. We said we were going to open the valve incrementally and then watch the metrics. Sounds boring. A little boring, but it's actually very smart. What were the metrics? We're going to start to open the valve, watch the diagnostic testing rate, watch the tracing rate, watch the antibody testing rate, watch the hospitalization rate, watch the infection rate, which is the seminal factor, rate of transmission. How quickly is the virus spreading? The RT, rate of transmission. If it goes over 1, red lights, alarms, beeping, you have a real problem. If one person is affecting more than one additional person. And you watch the gauges. And if the gauges are staying down low, then you can open the valve more. Why do the valves stay down low? Because people are smart. And when you reopen, they don't just come out and act like they did. They understand it's a new normal and they act intelligently. Our metrics are all today very good. We're going to open the valve more than we originally anticipated because the metrics are so good. If the metrics change, that would change. But right now, that's where we are. We're going to accelerate the opening of temples, mosques, churches. In phase 2, they can open up to 25% occupancy of that building, okay? I was speaking to a minister about this. He said 25% occupancy, that's good news because it's better than 0. He said, but 25% occupancy, then I have to have 4 services to get everyone in. And then he said, well, you know, I have to give the same sermon 4 times. He said, hopefully by the 4th time I get it right. Yes, 25% occupancy is not as easy as 100% occupancy, but 100% occupancy is a mass gathering. You really can't do social distancing, et cetera. So phase 2, 25% occupancy. That begins immediately. Be smart, be smart. It doesn't mean you go to a temple or a mosque and you sit right next to a person. You have to socially distance. Watch on the entrance way and on the exit way when people tend to congregate going through the entrance or the exit. So we leave it to our faith-based partners to come up with a smart strategy about the way to do this. But this is an acceleration for us because we're doing so well on the metrics. But people still have to stay smart. And with this virus, you learn something new every week. And sometimes what you learn is different than what they told you in the first place. Who is the they? The they in this case are the global health experts. But the information has changed. And some of the information I imparted when I received it turned out that it's different. Now, the state of information is the virus can live in the air for 3 hours, which is actually frightening when you think about it. It means if I'm infected and I'm speaking and we have air molecules that I am dispersing, they could linger for 3 hours. You walk in 3 hours later, you actually breathe those air molecules. So that is a frightening fact. They now say surfaces are less important. It's not that they're not important. You can still get the virus from a surface, but the virus does not live as easily or as long on surfaces as they originally thought. Originally, children were not affected. Now we're studying the inflammatory syndrome that is affecting children all across the globe. Not a significant number of children yet, but it's an area that is just being developed. They originally said if you were infected, you couldn't be reinfected. And that was theoretically a way for the workforce to go back to work. People who were infected were going to go back to work because they couldn't get reinfected. Well, that's wrong. Infected people may be able to get infected. A new piece of information that reinforces what we've been saying, the World Health Organization now says that masks are more important than they had originally recommended. They had originally recommended they were important for healthcare workers. They are now saying that they're helpful for the general population. On masks, if you remember, when masks first started, the CDC or the federal agencies were saying, yeah, they couldn't hurt, but maybe they weren't great. That's come a long way. The masks are, the more people have learned, the more important the masks are. In a way to make sure people can get masks, we're going to sign an executive order saying that we will prosecute price gouging on PPE. To give you an idea of where we were, the N95 masks, which we needed during the middle of the pandemic for the healthcare professionals. Before the pandemic, we were paying 70 cents for a mask. In the middle of the pandemic, $7 per mask for the same mask. So whatever we can do on a statewide basis is statewide price gouging. Doesn't mean China can't gouge us or another country, but we'll have price gouging in the state of New York. We had continued protests last night all across the state. The protests were mainly peaceful. I think Barbara Jordan, God rest her soul, who was a great representative in this country, said it right. What the people want is very simple. They want America as good as its promise. And that's what the protesters are saying. They're saying enough is enough. Mr. Floyd's death, Eric Garner's death, Abner Louima's death, Amadou Diallo's death, Rodney King's death. When does it end? And I think they're right. This is a national moment for change, and New York is going to lead the way on this change. We have always done it and will continue to do it. You know, when it comes to change, there's talk and there's action, right? I told you my grandfather, when a politician used to come on TV and I'd be watching the TV, any politician would come on, my grandfather would go like this. And I didn't know what that meant. He was an Italian immigrant, and he said a lot of things that I didn't really understand. And one day I said, Grandpa, what is that? He said, oh, the politicians, that's all they do is talk. That's all they do is talk. We should do this, we should do this, we should do this. Yeah, do something. What have you done? What have you actually accomplished for people besides this? New York, we're about doing. We're about action. We're about results. Seize the day. Carpe diem. We have a moment here where we can make change. It's not just about seizing a day, seizing a moment. How do you say seize the moment in Latin? Nobody knows. I took Latin, I should know. Carpe Momentum is my Latin translation. I took Latin in high school. I wouldn't vouch for that, but that's the best I could do. Carpe Momentum, seize the moment. And we have a moment. And New York is going to seize the moment. The legislature is going to come back next week. We have the Say Their Name agenda, transparency of prior disciplinary actions for police officers, the 50A bill. No chokeholds. No chokeholds. How many times do you have to learn the same lesson? No false race-based 9/11 reports. The Attorney General is an independent prosecutor for police murders, which I did as an executive order 5 years ago. Let's codify it. So it's not up to the next governor to decide whether or not they want to do it. It will be in the law. Pass the bills. Actually make the change. Then other states will look at New York and say, well, New York did this, why can't we do it? That's New York at its best. That's the history of New York, right? That's Stonewall, that's Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire. That's New York at its best, leading the way. That's what we did when we passed marriage equality, and the rest of the country said, oh, let's look at that. And we passed the bill and went right across the nation. Free college tuition, minimum wage, $15, so people can actually live and pay rent and eat all at the same time. The best gun safety law in the United States after Sandy Hook massacre, right? Carpe Momentum, the most aggressive renewable energy program, and will be the first with the best criminal justice reform. That's the plan for next week. Next week on Monday, New York City opens, starts phase 1. That's great news. You look at the numbers on New York City, they have dropped dramatically. They were at a high of positive testing at 57%. They're now down to 2%. You want to talk about a turnaround? This one, my friends, is going to go in the history book. New York was the hardest hit. And in 98 days, we have gotten to a much, much different place. There is no state in the United States that has gone from where we were to where we are. No state in the United States that has gone from where we were to where we are. You'd be hard-pressed to find a country that went from where we were to where we are. Hospitalizations went from 12,000 down to 1,500. Phase 1 guidelines starts Monday. It's construction, it's manufacturing, it's curbside pickup. Pursuant to these rules, curbside pickup, in-store pickup where curbside is not practical. They're prearranged, you're not there to browse and shop, social distancing. Construction and manufacturing, masks must be worn. And again, WHO just pointed out how important they are. Employer must provide masks, no congregate settings. We're sending 1 million masks to the MTA, 25,000 gallons of hand sanitizer, made right here in the state of New York, 2-ounce bottles for the MTA reopening. The MTA will reopen with disinfected train cars, never heard of before. They used to complain about how dirty they were. They are now disinfected for the first time. My house doesn't have disinfected bathrooms, but the subway cars are disinfected, the Long Island Railroad is disinfected, buses, etc. As office workers go back to work, we're allowing commercial buildings to take the temperature of everyone who enters the building. I don't want anyone to take my temperature. That's going to be a problem because we're giving commercial buildings the right to take the temperature of everyone who walks into a building. It's not just your health, it's the people you could infect. And remember that when you go back to work, it doesn't mean we're going to go back to the way we were. There's no going back in life. It's about going forward and finding a new normal with new behavior and new patterns in the workplace, right? And we need everyone to cooperate with that as they've cooperated all along. But congratulations to the people of New York State because they did this. People of New York City did this. People of Albany did this. They heard the information. They reacted. They responded. And they were so smart in what they did and so disciplined, and they went through hell, but they rose to the occasion. We used to talk about flattening the curve, these signs that the state put up, do your part, flatten the curve. That's where we started. We didn't just flatten the curve, we bent the curve, right? Flatten the curve was stop the increase and get to a plateau. That's the flat of the curve, get to a plateau. We went beyond that in New York. We didn't flatten the curve, we bent the curve. And we went from the worst to one of the best in a very short period of time. This is the New York curve, this is the rest of the nation. And they did not have the problem that we had. New Yorkers did it. Don't get cocky, don't get arrogant. They say New Yorkers are arrogant. I think they're talking about some of the people in this room. New Yorkers are arrogant. Don't get cocky, don't get arrogant, but all the arrows are pointed in the right direction. And we're going to stay New York tough, smart, united, disciplined, loving. Questions?
Our reporters still seeing peaceful protesters who are being shot by law enforcement or have been, in recent days, hit with batons by law enforcement. Should peaceful protesters be shoved or hit with batons if they don't clear out as fast as officers want? And how should officers enforce a curfew?
The Attorney General is doing an investigation of these situations currently. This is reality TV. As the protests are going on, they are on video, and the Attorney General is investigating them as they occur. And a police officer who acts wrongfully will be called to task, period. Body cameras, videos, cell phones. The investigation is ongoing now. The action will be in real time. The Attorney General has to produce the report in about 3 weeks. So there will be, all of this comes to light on a daily basis, and there will be responsibility within the coming days if the local police department doesn't take responsibility. Buffalo, Mayor Brown, I think acted appropriately and quickly. That was a horrendous situation in Buffalo. And we saw pictures of that. Other police departments are suspending police. But police have to do their jobs, protect public safety, but there's also police abuse. There's abuse of power. Protesters, most of the protesters are peaceful. They are indignant. It is righteous indignation. I don't see anybody who could see the Mr. Floyd video and not be indignant. I don't understand how you could see that murder on videotape and not be outraged. And I said from day one, I shared that outrage. And yeah, police have to do their jobs, but they don't have the right to abuse, to hurt, to use unnecessary force. And they're going to be held accountable. Yeah, Joe?
I was going to say on that, 2 of those officers this morning were charged with assault in Buffalo. What's your response to that? You were saying yesterday, what you saw, they should be fired.
Yeah, I said I'm a former prosecutor, attorney general, assistant district attorney. I don't like to get ahead of the local prosecutors because very often a prosecutor knows something that you don't. I think if they know something that you don't, they should tell you because it's a big public confidence factor. But I said right away after Buffalo, I think the DA should look at it. I think there was criminal liability from what I saw on the video. And I think what the mayor did and what the district attorney did was right, and I applaud them for acting as quickly as they did. There's no tolerance for delay in justice in society anymore, right? Justice delayed is justice denied. I think in Minnesota, they got into trouble when the district attorney came out and said, well, I'm looking, I'm thinking, I know things that you don't know. People won't hear that anymore. You know things that I don't know. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you know that is different than what I saw on the video, right? I saw the video. I saw what happened. Well, I know something else. Tell me what you know that is better than what I saw, right? That's what they were saying in Minneapolis. So, Buffalo video, we saw the video. what we saw was horrendous and disgusting, I believe illegal. So if there's something else that I didn't see, or if what I saw was not correct, then tell me. Otherwise, do justice. And that's what the mayor did, and that's what the DA did. And good for them, good for them. And look, all of these are difficult situations, right? And I understand that this situation is superheated, it is controversial, people are frightened, people are polarized. There is no path that is going to make everybody happy. There's no path that is going to make everybody happy. There is no path. There is a path to do the right thing and to do the just thing. But there is no path to make everybody happy. And I think what the mayor did and the district attorney did was the right thing, right? I tell my people inside when they want to go through a whole protracted policy debate, I said, tell me, what is the right thing? I said, what is the right thing? All right, what does your gut say is the right thing? Forget trying to make people happy. Never works. Never works in life. Doesn't work in personal relationships, doesn't work in government. Just do the right thing. Yes?
I have a question. Are you concerned that people are going to be walking away from their law enforcement careers, just with the resignations that we saw for 57 in support of their fellow officers in Buffalo? And not having a law enforcement background, I'm hearing criticism from those in the law enforcement communities that we don't know the full story because we didn't see what was going on beforehand. And when you're assigned to a unit like that, you have to keep going. And that's why there are EMTs there. And, you know, you can't bend over in the gear that you're wearing. You don't have the proper PPE to bend down and help somebody. And that's why there are EMTs on the scene. Not my words, what's being said to us.
I understand the argument that the police are trained to continue to move forward. I understand that argument. I don't know how that addresses the violence initially that knocks the man to the floor, right? Doesn't excuse that. And again, on these theories of you don't have the whole story. Well, then show me the whole story. If you have something different than what I saw, then tell me, because I know what I saw, and what I saw was terrible. So if you want to tell me you have something else, then tell me about something else. And look, a bad police officer is the enemy of every good police officer. No good, you know, from a police officer's point of view, they get tarnished by the bad act. And the police force loses respect and trust with the community by the bad act. And that's why the police are in such a difficult position also. No good police officer is going to defend this behavior. And I don't think they should. And if a police officer is saying, well, look, unless I get to knock people to the ground and hit them with a baton for no reason, I don't want to be a police officer, then don't be a police officer. Did you have a point?
No, I just wanted to also correct that those 57 officers didn't actually resign. They resigned the unit. But it had been misreported initially, I think misinterpreted, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
They resigned, as I understand it, from serving on this emergency task force, but they kept their job. They're still getting a check.
Outside of these protests and outside of the Buffalo situation, you've called for local prosecutors to not investigate or to have an independent investigation of police abuse. Can you kind of describe what your office or what your administration is doing to make that a reality on the ground? Have you spoken with local DAs to persuade them? Are you drafting up any legislation to make that a reality or any executive order?
It's the executive order that I did on the Attorney General and that we're codifying in law.
Or any further police abuse, you know, such as, you know, a rough arrest, not something that's directly related
No, I said to the
murder.
district attorneys. The only thing I said to the district attorneys was they should prosecute the looters. They should prosecute the looters, and they should prosecute people who committed criminal acts. They should prosecute them. You know, district attorneys don't have the right to gauge political wins and do what is politic. They have to do what is legal. And the looting that happened in New York City was reprehensible and frightening. And the last thing we need in New York City now is another frightening circumstance, right? We had COVID, we went through that, people were petrified. On top of that, now they have to worry about rampant looting, out of control, and a police force that isn't managed properly and didn't have the resources to stop the looting? No. Let's take one more. Jesse?
Governor, along those lines, have you had any indication that the curfew could be extended beyond this weekend in New York City?
I've not had any conversations about it.
And would you support such a thing?
I don't know what it is. You'd have to see what the proposal is. It's a beautiful Saturday. It's a beautiful Saturday. We had a great conversation. Enjoy the sun. I will